Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Lisa Erickson, and today I'm going to talk with you a little bit about core weakness and how that can cause hip and shoulder issues. Our core, as I like to call it, zone 1, is where all of our power and our force come from. Over the muscles is something called fascia, and that fascia kind of looks like the top of a membrane on a piece of chicken. If you go buy an uncooked piece of chicken and you were to take the little fibrous membrane that's over the top of that, it's kind of see-through, it looks like a film. If you were to peel that up and look at it, that is what we call fascia. And fascia connects all the different muscle groups of the body. So instead of the old school method of thinking, my shoulder hurts me, it hurts right here, and we look into that area and there's not too much going on with it, now we're starting to look at a more regional approach to it, which is this shoulder is supposed to transfer force from my hand, support my shoulder, and it is supposed to balance the body while I use the core. So the core is very much our stability region, and the shoulder is supposed to be very mobile and flexible. And in a lot of my climbers, what I'm starting to see is I'm starting to see a shoulder that is very rigid and stuck, a shoulder blade, the scapula, that we cannot control or won't hang correctly, and a core that we cannot recruit and we cannot make stable while we're trying to climb. So if you're a climber who really enjoys overhanging climbing and you are reaching back trying to climb up something in your core won't fire enough to support you, what we're going to see is other muscles cheating to try to help us to get up that wall. So either the pec major, pec minor, here's pec major, here's pec minor, are going to fire and try to stabilize and support that shoulder, or we're going to see our deltoid muscle, which is responsible for pulling the shoulder up or pulling that arm up and forward. Those muscle fibers are going to get involved trying to support this shoulder. That is something that is very important with our climbers because we don't see a lot of strength and balance through the core section. So the next time you're climbing, I want you to focus on your core, especially when you're hitting towards the end of your session or more towards that endurance point during the day, and seeing, is my core contracted? Is it holding my body stable? And if it is not, or we have weakness in those muscles, that is something to keep in mind. Also, with shoulder injuries, we want to also look at the muscles on the back. So I keep pointing to my left shoulder. If you have a left shoulder issue, we really need to look into our core muscles, so the top obliques on this side, the bottom obliques on that side, so perhaps internal oblique on this side, external oblique on that side, and then opposing muscles on the back of the body, the top muscle, or the top shoulder muscle on the back, and the left low back to counterbalance, counterpull those muscles that are pulling here in the front while we're loading that shoulder. If we don't have the muscular ability to hold that shoulder in a stable position, this is why these injuries are occurring. So as we are reaching and grabbing onto something, that shoulder drifting forwards or up is a limiting factor in how much force we can create out of the shoulder. We want that shoulder to sit correctly so when you're reaching up, that shoulder blade doesn't follow it forward. So just looking in the mirror, I want you to look at your armpits, and I want you to see if you see more muscle mass on one armpit versus the other armpit as you raise your arms up. This shoulder blade should not be following the arm itself, the humerus, as it raises up into the air. And if your lats are too tight, or your subscapularis is too tight, or the serratus anterior is too tight, those can lock your scapula down so that it is bound. Or we will also see that muscles into the back of the tricep, or just kind of this whole deep armpit region, all those muscles need to be light, soft and loose and flexible so that we can actually do that motion. Because if you can't bring your arm up and everything is binding in the front or binding underneath, that is a major reason why we're having shoulder issues. So something to think about. Look into the pec and make sure these are nice and loose as well. You can take your gym buddy and test him or her and see, as they lay on their back, does their shoulder rotate forward? It should be laying flat on your bed or on the table. It shouldn't be rotated up off the table, and that could be a sign of tight pec muscles. So really looking at these shoulder injuries, they can be quite complex. So the biggest recommendation I have for you is to go in and kind of scope around them and see what other groups are involved and what is our mobility of that shoulder. If we are able to reach back very easily, however we cannot go the other direction easily, that is a sign that that shoulder joint is not hanging correctly. And if we're not using these joints and the way they're designed to be used, we have injuries that occur from them. An excellent kind of a correlation that I heard was one with automobiles to human bodies, and it kind of goes like this. If you're driving around and you have your foot on the brake and you have your foot on the gas at the exact same time you're driving around, obviously your brakes aren't going to last that long. So if you go into your car dealership and say, hey, my brakes are wearing out, they're going to tell you you need new brakes. And then you go in 2 months later and they say, well, that's kind of strange, you're back in again, but here's some more brakes, and you will end up being titled that you have chronic brake failure. But if your mechanic were to get in your car and watch you drive your car around and notice that, hey buddy, you are doing both at the same time, and that is why your brakes are wearing out fast, he'll be able to teach you how to use your vehicle so that it lasts longer and it's used how it's designed to be used. So us as your medical providers are kind of coming in to see us with our education as for how things are supposed to move and how they're supposed to work and correlate together. We'll definitely be able to help you figure this out. But going in and ensuring that that shoulder blade is hanging correctly, work the pec into the pec muscle with balls and tools. An excellent tool to help your shoulder to hang right if it wants to hang forward is to get in there. Here. You can use, I just have like a climbing hold, but you can get in there and just lean against a wall in this area, so arm behind the back, and just kind of get into that pec muscle. And we may not be feeling for things that are sore as much as things that are tight or twangy. A tight muscle is a weak muscle, and if a muscle's tight, the joints that are nearby to it have much more wear and tear than they should have, or we can't use them in the way that they're designed to be used. So even though a muscle isn't sore, I definitely want you to go in and try to get those muscular knots out. That way we're mobile, that way that joint works as it's designed to be used. Because what we'll notice is if a muscle isn't in full control of itself, it starts to recruit other muscles to help. So if your deltoid is in pain, all of a sudden your trap is going to get involved, your pec's going to get involved, all the muscles that attach on all four directions, north, south, east, west, to that injury are going to get involved. And that's where it's very hard to figure out where it's coming from when you come in and you have the whole region is tight. So we slowly start to untangle it and really figure out where is the weakness, what caused the injury, but mobility is a huge part of that. So getting into this, loosening that up, getting the elbow up on the wall, and perhaps pressing with a ball into against your scapula and ensuring that those two will separate and they're not just bound together, so that you can open those up to a nice angle and not have that be all locked down. And then also working onto the back of the shoulder to ensure that those muscles are strong enough to pull that shoulder back and down. And so a lot of shoulders, I know Sasha DeGulian was just talking about this on Man versus Princess, but a lot of climbers don't have the strength in order to control their shoulder blade and use it correctly. And if you can't hold that shoulder blade flat against your rib cage, then you have no business climbing, because what happens is as that shoulder blade wings off of the back, so we'll see the winged edge of your scapula sticking up, all of a sudden your shoulder is hanging at an incorrect angle and it's wearing out faster. So you can hang for maybe a jug and warm up, pulling that shoulder blade back and down, pulling it straight down towards the ground as you're hanging. You're welcome to have your feet up on the wall. You don't just have to be dangling from one arm, but just start to strengthen that muscle up and get the endurance of this is how the shoulder blade is supposed to be held back and down. And as I'm moving, as I'm focusing on climbing, I don't want it popping up and popping forward. So Yes, you might be able to control it as you're focusing on it, but climbing is something that's very dynamic and very unconscious. And we have to have that so trained, so ingrained into our body that you should be able to focus on your foot placement or how your fingers are placed and not be focused on, is my core fired? Is my shoulder back and down? And it should be automatic. And that's where your homework exercises come in and your drills come in to ensure